So first of all, I have these 3 questions for you that are all listed as number 1. What is primary literature? And how does that compare to reviews and preprints? So can anyone give me an answer to that question? Something that you may have learned in other classes?
And you can say, I'm not sure.
So I know a review is like a paper that covers like a very broad topic and kind of like summarizes all of like what we know about it and the evidence and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then a preprint is like a pre-published, like it hasn't been reviewed,
Mm-hmm.
and you can publish it to like I'm not sure why necessarily. So I guess primary literature is like the reviewed actual like the evidence that gets cited and stuff in reviews and like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So
struggling through that.
no, that's right. The primary literature is where the people who did the experiments write something about it, usually for the first time, and this is the report that tells you and gives you the data on that subject material. A review is where a person takes a whole bunch of papers that other people, and sometimes they also wrote, and put that together in a way that makes a lot of links between those studies and puts it in a broader context. And then a preprint is where the person who's done the study has enough data together that they can write what looks like a paper and that they can probably submit it to a journal for publication, but they post it online so that people can see the data and the work and comment on it before it's actually been peer reviewed. And all of these things are accessible online, and you might find as you start looking through subjects that are interesting to you. You don't necessarily always come upon just one of these kinds of articles. So after we go through a little exercise, we'll talk about how you can find primary literature, and then go through some more exercises about finding papers, using some strategies that will help you be efficient. So first of all, I'm going to give you guys the chance to look at this. I guess this would be slide 6, where you discuss within your team, are these articles primary scientific literature, and how do you know? So there's a list of 4 sets of PMIDs there. Each of them should be a link. So I would like you to, let's just start, everybody look at the examples. things you look for. In CACAO, we only annotate primary research articles that have been published and are in Pubmed. So there's that. All right, now moving on, as kind of a review of what we just talked about, places that you often look in the article to figure out whether it's primary or not. Look at your title. Is it very specific? Is it super general? More creative phrasing tends to be a review. If it's like some catchy little title, it might be a review more than a primary article. In the abstract, if you've got things that say, in this study we did XYZ, it's probably primary. If it says in this review, dead giveaway. Although some reviews, just to be confusing, do present data that has not been published anywhere else.
Sneak stuff in there,
Yeah, it's not supposed to be that way, but that does happen. Okay, so then look at the figures. Is it experimental data, or is it all cartoons and summary figures? Look at the journal. Does the name of the journal, the type of journal, the section of the journal give you a clue of what kind of article it is? And then something we talked a little bit about preprints. Predatory journals we didn't really talk about, but there are not all articles are going to have the same quality of science. So even if you find something that fits all of the criteria for what looks like a primary research article, that doesn't mean that it's going to be a great study. So that's something that comes with experience, knowing, recognizing journal names, and being able to evaluate the science on your own. Okay, so here at A&M, where do you get online articles for free? Because you never pay for an article, ever. Don't pay $40, don't pay $30, don't pay for any articles. So there's a couple of links in here that might be handy for you. And the first one is a list of all the journals that our library has paid to have access to the articles that are in those journals. So if you find an article and there's no direct link on PubMed to get you to the journal or to get you to the article, you can check this list to see if A&M has access to all the articles in that journal. There's the second one that I really like, the citation linker. It's been broken. I don't know if it's working now.
It's broken.
I complained to the library.
Oh, no. It's my favorite thing in the library.
So it's supposed to give you a way really quick to find out if A&M has access to a specific article. You can use the DOI, Digital Object Identifier. You can use the PubMed ID. You can use keywords. Hopefully that will be a really useful tool for you. I strongly recommend bookmarking this in your personal internet browser, whatever you use. It's super useful. If we don't have access to an article, which happens, we're a big school, we've got access to a lot of things, but there are some things we don't have access to. Don't pay for it, request it via interlibrary loan. Has anyone here used interlibrary loan services before? No? Wow. Well, it's available to you. Basically, you just fill out this form online. Sometimes there's even a link that will fill out the form for you. So if you go to this ILL link, it'll say, tell me the title of the article, the name of the journal, the date, the pages, and then you just request it, and then our library will send out a ping to all of the other libraries out there and be like, hey, does anybody have this article? And they'll be like, oh, I have it, and they'll send a photocopy, and you'll get a PDF of the article within a few days. So it's not hard to get access to articles that we don't have, because we're at a very nice school with good library connections that will get you what you need. If you ever need help using the ILL form, happy to help you with that. And another way to get an article that you don't have access to is to email the authors. People don't mind hearing from people like, hey, I'm interested in your stuff, I want to read it, will you send me a copy? And almost always they will send you a PDF right away. So that's always an option. And then there's this unpaywall. I actually don't know if it's still working.
So the citation search is working for me.
It's working? Good.
They changed the user interface.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
See?
Oh, yeah. It is very different. that's fine, as long as it works. Unpaywall was an effort by some individuals, I think, around the world that were trying to make it easier for people to access the results of the research that we've paid for through our tax dollars. And so this was a way that you could get access to articles. So you can always try that. And then also be aware that if you are not on campus and you need to get access to things that you should have access to, it'll be like, oh, you don't have access, you need to pay. Either using that citation linker and logging yourself in, or VPNing to the A&M network.
Okay.
Will
You guys all know how to VPN in?
I
You
will
know.
admit I have never VPN'd
You know?
to the TAMU network.
I have never done it, no.
Okay. All right. So there's the link called connect.tamu.edu, and what it does is it installs a tool that then works through your single sign-on, and which means you'll usually have to have your phone with you because it'll ask for dual authentication as well.
Do a
So,
push thing.
but it basically gets you to where stuff gets relayed through the internal network, so that outside people think that you're actually here on campus and connected to the network. So it's actually very useful.
Yeah, not just for getting journal articles, but
Right. Like we
Yeah,
use it all
if
the
you
time
ever-
to connect to the servers,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So,
Yeah, whenever y'all work in labs or whatever, if you work here and you have to connect to your own lab server, you'll have to do it that way. So it's
Yeah.
good tool to learn. Good practice.
okay. So
it's why I'm constantly looking for my phone at random times when I'm at home.
Yeah. Don't want that
Because
duo.
unlike the websites, it doesn't have a remember me for 2 weeks option.
Yeah, I left my phone downstairs this morning and I was upstairs on my wife's computer doing something and logging in, and I was like, oh no.
Yep.
I have to go downstairs.
All right. Okay. So that's where you get access to the articles. Now, how do you find them? So we're going to talk about Pubmed because that's the one that is well established, well maintained, highly used, and the one that's most relevant for our class. So there's a link there to Pubmed in case you want to go directly to it. There are lots of articles. I think it's more than 29 million now, maybe more than 30 million citations that are available to be searched there. So how many of you guys have done searching through Pubmed at least a little bit? Like a little bit? Okay. So I want to highlight a few things that you might not have done or heard of before. So the first thing that I have here after that splash page is that you can log in to NCBI, which is the center that hosts Pubmed, and you can log in with your TAMU credentials such that it will now know that you're associated with A&M, and it will give you direct access to the things that A&M has access to. And it will allow you to save your searches and things like that. So I have the little arrows here for how you do that on the main page. You click sign into NCBI, and then instead of like creating an NCBI account, you do third-party sign-in options, and then you select A&M, and then you sign in with your net ID. So it's not very hard. Now when you're searching, you can obviously just do a quick search on the front page, and that's real easy, and you can get places there, but it doesn't necessarily get you where you want very quickly. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the advanced search, which is linked there directly under the quick search bar. So the advanced search gives you a lot of options for what kinds of things you want to search for. So just like Dr. Who was talking about there, the papers, once they're in PubMed, they get all sorts of metadata added to them. And so things are classified like, this is the title, these are the authors, this is the author's first and last names, these are the keywords. All of those things are built in to make it easier for you to find the articles that you're looking for. And you can add those kinds of things to this advanced search to find exactly what you're looking for. So on the second slide of the advanced search, you can see that I've got a really complicated, what's called a string in that search bar. It says, I'm looking for something that has an affiliation to Indiana University. It has the author, Mukupadai S. It has the keyword capsid in the title or the abstract, but it's not published in the Journal of Virology. And so I added all of those by putting in specific field categories with Boolean qualifiers. You guys know what Boolean qualifiers are?
So you ever heard Boolean logic in math class or anything like that?
Mm-mm.
So it's basically and or
And not.
are Boolean qualifiers. So Boolean algebra is like a way to make statements that have like this and this parenthesis, not this other thing. And so in computers, often that's used to restrict searches and queries. So
It's always all caps though. So if you're looking at, I don't know what slide number this is anymore. If you're looking at this one that has the long string at the top, it's like IU affiliation and all caps, and then or all caps and not all caps. So if you can use those Boolean qualifiers in the quick search bar, and I do it all the time because I'm looking for a paper that's by author Young and has the word Spannin in it. And so I want Young and Spannin. I only want papers that have both of those things. And they work really well for narrowing down your searches.
Right, because if you don't narrow it down, Young gives you a lot of results.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you can add as many of these specific field categories as you want. After you've added like so many, it kind of becomes like cumbersome. But you can add as many as you want, and then you can click this little add to history button, and it'll kind of save your search, and you can go back to it. So that's kind of useful. And then on the next slide, I go back to the results page. So now we've done a search. In this case, I just did a simple search for 2 authors with a Boolean qualifier and Mukupadai and Moore, and it gives the results. There's only 3 of them there. Sometimes you'll get thousands though. So you might want to narrow it down. And on the left-hand side of the page, there are all kinds of filters that you can activate. And all you have to do is click on them. So say you only want review articles because actually you don't know anything about this subject and you want to get a broad overview. So you could click review and it will only show review articles. Or you could click, CRISPR is like a really hot topic and there's been tons of research, but I only want to know what's been published in the past like 6 months. I don't want to know all the old stuff because I'm pretty up and up on what's going on. So you
Which is
could.
not really true of you guys, but it's okay.
But you could custom range the
Right.
publication dates. So this gives you a way to kind of narrow down the searches based on those common categories. And then, next slide where it kind of gives a paper, fusion of M. apple and Venus fluorescent proteins, blah, blah, blah. So on the right-hand side, once you're looking at a paper, there are 2 different parts of the sidebar that I want you to look at. The first one is the similar articles section. So because there's all this metadata about the papers in the database, Pubmed will be like, hey, this other paper is very similar to this one and you might be interested in it. So it'll kind of suggest other papers there. And there's usually a mix of primary articles and review articles, and the review articles are labeled. And so, so you can easily get some more papers on this subject if you're interested in it, or if you're doing a literature review for another class and you need to make sure you've found all the relevant papers, this can help you find those. And then the second section is the cited by section. So that means that this paper was published, and then a little bit later somebody else did a study, and in their writing, they thought it was relevant to cite this paper in their writing. And so it's probably on somewhat similar topic, or
Right.
at least is tangentially related.
So if you think of like going through the literature, it's kind of like time travel, that the reference section in a paper lets you go into the past and see what things the authors cited. But the paper itself usually doesn't have information that tells you its importance in the future. So if you're looking at a paper from 5 years ago or 6 months, whatever, then the significance is actually in the things that get published afterwards. And the cited by helps you with that. There's actually a whole nother resource that people pay to use called Web of Science that is based on the analysis of citations and who cites whom. And the A&M library does have access to that, but now that PubMed is doing a lot more of that themselves, you don't actually need it as much. So it's like, but like, you found this particular thing, so you can say, oh, well, let's see if there's anything newer that I could use that hasn't been annotated yet, right? Or if there's like some cool method that is associated with evidence code that I understand now because I've been being, reading all about it, then I can say, well, what else uses this method that would be an example of the cited by.
Okay, so then I just want to emphasize in this next slide that as you start using Pubmed more and more, remember that for CACAO, Pubmed ID is what goes into your annotation field, not PMC ID. PMC ID is wrong. You must use the Pubmed ID, PMID.
Right. And be sure to pull down the little menu thing that says PMID and then put the number in, because if you just put the number in with a blank, you get this sort of weird thing where you get the number in twice.
Yeah, it'll be like PMID number,
And we got-
colon, ID number.
Yeah. One of yours had that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can fix that, right? When you have it.
So now a little bit more exercises. So this is a chance for you to actually use Pubmed. So there are several things here. Try at least 3 of them on your own in Pubmed. See what happens. Search for a word, pare it down with a filter, use a specific keyword, see how many papers do you get. Use the Boolean operators. Try finding a specific author. How many who's are there in Pubmed? How many who J's? Who JC's? Do you have to add an affiliation to figure out
Terrifying.
which papers are Doctor Who's? See if you can do a search in Pubmed that will only find the very first paper we read in this class. Try a few of those things and explore your Pubmed searching for. We'll give you 3 or 5 minutes, something like that.